Good morning and welcome to today's Cleantech podcast. I'm your host, Dawn Van Zant, founder of InvestorIdeas.com, and this is my way of helping you stay informed with Cleantech stock news and interviews with thought leaders. Learn about today's problems and solutions for the future. Let's all do our part to make this beautiful planet a better place each and every day. Good morning. Today I'm talking to one of the top experts in the water sector, in my opinion. Bill Brennan, currently chairman of Verano Water Group. Bill has a long history as an expert in the water industry, from fund manager, asset manager, and a long relationship with Waterkeeper Alliance, where he built a valued friendship with Robert F. Kennedy Jr. Bill talks about his past with water and what he sees for the future of the sector, with innovation and new leadership driving a new era. Thanks for joining me today, Bill. It has been a long time since I've interviewed you. I was looking back at some of my notes, and you were one of my top speakers in an investment conference for the environment and water back in 2007. So it's been a long history with you. So for our listeners, can you talk about your background in the water industry, from fund manager to asset manager, and then where you are today?
Sure, happy to. Now, my start in the water business came back all the way back in 1989 with Log Companies Group out of Atlanta, Georgia. So I actually started as an engineer, transitioned over to the consulting side at Coopers & Lybrand after business school, and ran their water consulting practice out of Philadelphia, and then was recruited by an investment bank to cover the environmental sector, which was technologies, and I kept pushing water. I said, folks, this is something that is underserved, not understood correctly, and as an investment thesis is multi-generational and will only get stronger. And that was all the way back in 1994. And the path led me to the folks at Summit Global, and through them I was able to manage two mutual funds, one for Kinetics and one for the Rothschild family in France, and then 5 years as the CIO at Summit, and then transitioned out of the public equities into the project finance aspect, because I thought, the remainder of my career, I wanted to do things and go back to my engineering roots where there was tangible results. It just wasn't, mark to market on a daily basis of a stock going up and down. It was, what could we build that would be a game changer in the water space? And where were there opportunities, especially around the lack of private capital in the water space that really understood it? And we're still struggling with that today, is that a lot of people, they're investors in water, but they really don't understand the underlying nuances. They don't understand the localness of water. And from that perspective, we've taken a huge leap forward, especially, I'd say, over the last decade, but there's still a lot of room to go, a ton of room to go. So, it's been a great ride in the water space, and recently named as chairman of Verano Water Holdings, where we're directly in the middle of PFAS treatment on one side, on the product side, and on the lead pipe replacement program under the Infrastructure Act with the guys that run Community Infrastructure Partners. So, again, two high-profile, high-growth areas in the water space, and came out of retirement after Resilient Infrastructure Group, which we had sold to Partners Group. And, we were doing RNG and water. It was kind of a split. But again, really having a good understanding of what the water business is about. You'll see that there's certain private equity folks that have been in this for a while, and they've done it successfully on the equipment side and on the service side. And then others that, they take that step forward and they say, oh, we want to be in water because investors push them that way. But, you really need people on your team that have been in the industry. So it makes a big difference.
Can you talk about PFAS and what that aspect in the water industry? Because I've talked a lot about it in my podcast, and it drives me crazy. What they've done to us in terms of contaminating each of us. I think 99% of us on the planet, they say, has now been impacted by it. But for our listeners that don't really understand it, can you talk about what that is, what it actually has done to the water, what it does to us, and then how are you going to address that? That's a big issue, and I think if you can do that, that's exciting.
It really is, and it's one of the highest profile areas of the water space, pending regulatory initiatives that are impacting the entire sector, is that it started in the Trump administration under Dave Ross, who's now the head of governmental affairs for Veolia globally. But when the EPA rules came out as far as establishing the nationwide drinking water limits of these forever chemicals, and it's not just PFAS, it's PFOA, it's PFNA, it's PFHXS, it's PFBS, and HFPODA, known as Gen X. And so these forever chemicals primarily came out from companies like the Moores, 3M, and it was the fire retardant. And as you take a look back over the last, say, 50 years, and you see a lot of things like the Teflon pans and things like that, well, they had PFAS in it. Well, nobody knew at the time that PFAS, and all of the things they never biodegraded. They stayed around forever, and they kind of moved from one place to the next. And so within the water, wherever the water or the liquid moved to, and whether it was a landfill and you had leachate, or a groundwater where bodies of water flowed to, and you had a high concentration because of the flow characteristics creating this basin of water. And then when you test it for PFAS or PFAS, you go, oh my gosh, this thing is through the roof. And so, there's different categories here, and that, the hazardous part of this even further complicates the issue, especially when you think about wastewater utilities and biosolid disposal, because they're going to get pulled into litigation and liability issues, despite the utilities being passive receivers of PFAS. There's still, that open door that it was created by somebody else, but you were the ones that propagated the spread in the manner of just how your business ran, not deliberately and not knowingly breaking any laws, but it's one of those things that it's going to be not only a legal challenge from the cities, the states, and the industries, because everybody's taking a look and saying, how are we going to fund the remediation of this? And I think, coming into a Republican-controlled Congress and White House, Biden's group and the EPA, I always take a look at that, and they play things at a very, press level. But when it really starts to dig in and actually do stuff, they fail miserably. And the Republicans never get enough credit for actually doing things that are tangible, and it's pushed to the side and ignored by the press. Hopefully those days are over, and especially with around, PFAS and what's happening and the cleanup that needs to take place. Those acts started under Dave Ross back in 2017, 18, the regs were being written, and I hope, somebody as competent like a Jessica Kramer, who was David's number 2 when Dave ran EPA water under Trump, they get somebody of that caliber to step in, because this is going to be a timely thing. When you take a look across the EPA and you say that the air market and other places may be pushed to the side a little bit, I don't think water is going to be marginalized in any way, shape, or form. And I really believe that, if anything, especially with Bobby Kennedy coming in at HHS, and full disclosure, I'm a trustee at Waterkeepers. I have been for the past over 10 years. Know Bobby well. He's a friend of mine. And I think that you're going to see the health community and the water community really take a look at how they interact. What are the triggers? What are things that potentially in the water could interact with certain foods? These are all unknowns, but we know from just the present state of health in our country, whether it's obesity, whether it's the situation with autism, all of those different things, water's going to be in there in the mix as far as we need to do something, and we need to do it right, and we need to get it cleaned up. And I think the PFAS, maybe the timeline on the removal of it will be extended, but I don't think that four parts per trillion, unless they can show empirical scientific evidence that was too low and we're going to raise it. I think we're at that number for quite a while.
So with your company, what are you actually doing about it? Just testing it, or is there anything you can do to remove it?
No. So the beauty of the whole thing with Smart Sponge and Verano was the fact that Abtech Industries, which is now part of Verano Water Group, Abtech had focused on the removal of contaminants, particulates in stormwater, and particularly in the grates. And they've been involved in some large projects around the United States, Chester, PA being one of them, where people don't think about stormwater runoff, and municipalities file their MS4s with the states, but nothing is ever done as far as really taking a corrective action to all of that runoff that comes from the street. So if you're in a dry area, say like Phoenix, Arizona, where the company's headquartered, for a couple months period, and then you start to get those monsoon rains, and all of that contaminant and dirt and everything that has been kind of gritted into the streets, they get this massive rain, the monsoon rains, and it washes all into the wastewater treatment systems. Your first line of defense potentially was the storm grates, where the water would run through high flow rate and remove the contaminants, particulates that it was designed to do. We took a conscientious effort at the beginning of 2024 to redirect the product into the industrial market and treat things like selenium, treat things like arsenic, treat things like PFAS, where there were problems, and specific industries like the aerospace industry, like the aviation industry, they're dealing with a lot of the runoff at their facilities, not only the operational facilities, but even the repair facilities as well, and started to position the Smart Sponge through different additives to take care of those particular issues like PFAS and like arsenic. And so the beauty of the sponge is that it's a high flow rate. So you're moving water at an unbelievable rate through this sponge, and you can do it either by pump or by gravity. And that's one of the things that people take a look at, because you need a high flow rate. You can't slow down existing systems and kind of plug in and say, well, we're going to have to slow down the overall treatment because we can only treat to a certain flow rate with some of the technology that we've looked at that's out there. But, when you take a look, and we can operate, 40 gallons per minute per square foot, and the typical is 6 to 10 gallons per minute per square foot of traditional methods that are in the marketplace. And, we've had this third party tested the whole bit, and the removal rates, Dawn, are unbelievable. I mean, it's as high as like 98% in under 2 minutes, and over 50% removal just within the first 45 seconds. So it is truly a game changer when it comes to PFAS.
I don't think a lot of people understand also the direct relationship between your health and the water you're drinking. When you're talking about obesity, for example, if your body's full of toxins, it can't cleanse things. So even if you are trying to eat healthy, sometimes your organs, your liver, your kidneys are full of all these chemicals, these forever chemicals. So there is a direct correlation. It's not just what people eat; it's what the water is, what's in their drinking water, and all the chemicals that are in it.
That is correct. And Dawn, that's an interesting point, because we've had conversations away from your podcast, but a lot of people that know my situation with the vaccine, I had a horrible reaction to it. I ended up in the hospital twice from it. And it was part of my original decision to retire, because going through a situation like that and finding out that your liver, your kidney, your adrenal gland, all of this damage that was done. And I have to give hats off to functional medicine and the folks at the FLCCC and people like Dr. J.P. Salibi and Dr. McCullough. I went through it. And part of it, too, was the type of the water that you drink, in addition to being on not pharmaceuticals, but nutraceuticals and how it interacts with your body. And also, people don't realize that this filtered water, we're not receiving the right minerals, the way that God created water for us, clean water to drink. And sometimes this ultra purification has led to a removal of essential minerals that your body needs to intake and process to function correctly. And all of this is tied together. We toy around with things and we come up and think that, we've got to figure it out. But, the body is one of those things that yet to be really unraveled as far as how do all of these things function at one time and the interaction, especially between the organs. And you're spot on. The water plays a critical role in that.
Well, I'm personally beyond excited that Bobby Kennedy's got a voice now. For so long, no one would even interview him. He was censored. He was canceled. And ever since he's been affiliated with Trump, the biggest thing, I think a lot of people would have liked to have seen him become president, but if that wasn't a reality, the biggest thing that I think is a gain, not just for the United States, but I think anybody globally, is that his voice and his wisdom is now being shared out there, whether it's the vaccine, whether it's just health in general, food, processed food, and water. I have a funny, interesting story with him personally. When I was in my early 30s, I was working for an ozone water company, and I was young, and it was a public company. I was sending things out to everybody, trying to get our story out, and I sent him a water filter, and he actually was gracious enough. He sent me a handwritten letter thanking me for it, and I kept it for years and years, and then one of my moves, I somehow lost it, but I just thought, an example of just the kind of person he is, that he sent me this personal handwritten letter when I was really nobody that he knew. I thought it was just a statement of who he was, and I have always loved what he stood for.
Well, that's classic Bobby, and I can say a couple things about him. One, as far as his research and when he digs into something, and we've seen it, time and time again on the environmental side, he and his people are impeccable. And then with Children's Defense Fund and everything that they've done there, I think, the big fear, and we saw it because just how the press handled it, and they tried to paint him as somebody that was fringe, conspiracy, all of these things, which is absolutely ludicrous. This man is as based and as solid with regards to his approach, and really, I encourage people to read the books that he's written, The Real Dr. Fauci, things like that, where the sourcing, this is not Bobby making up stuff on the fly. Everything that he points to has a reference source or multiple reference sources that are indisputable. And this is where I think the public has gotten tired, and I hate to go down this path, Dawn, but I'm going to do it because, water's a big piece of this. People realize when they're being lied to. And I think the awakening has started to take place, and that you can't keep everybody in this cloud of fog, which I believe they've tried to do. And when I say they, people have always asked me, said, Billy, what do you mean by they? Big pharma, big food, all of these people, the cartels, they're no different. They are cartels. And at this point, hey, we need to strip it back and find out what their real intent is. What are they really doing? And it's no accident that you saw red dye actually removed by the FDA several weeks ago with the full knowledge that, oh, boy, we're in trouble. Bob Kennedy's coming in here, and this is going to be a different game. So let's start to line up our ducks beforehand. And that was, to me, that was the first indication. Okay, we're going to see more of that.
One of the things that I'd like to ask, and this is just a guess, an educated guess, when I've reported on some of the companies that have contaminated the water, the air, the soil, you look at what happens. There's litigation. They go to court. Sometimes they're in court for 10 to 15 years. They hire the biggest legal team ever. And even when they do get a penalty, they have contingencies in the agreement that sometimes are just never going to be able to be matched, whether it's, like I say, whether it's water, land, soil, it doesn't really matter. And so the people that have been affected are usually have passed away or so critically ill by the time there's any settlement, it doesn't make a difference. And then you see the companies literally go back and do it all over again because they just look at it as a legal penalty, a cost of doing business, or they'll take that division of their company, put it in bankruptcy and say, well, it wasn't me, then they'll form a new. It's incredible when you follow the path of what these companies do to get out of accountability and liability. They will literally do anything. And I'm hoping, with my biggest hope, that having Bobby Kennedy in and looking at how Trump handles things, that maybe this path can change, that this process of just putting it in court but no real consequences can have a different outcome.
Well, the thing is, too, Dawn, when you take a look, there's something called the Political Economy Research Institute, Perry, at the University of Massachusetts Amherst, that lists every year the toxic 100 water polluters. And Dow, Huntsman, Xylem, Celanese, ExxonMobil, Honeywell, Boston Scientific, Alpha, Goodyear, JBS. I mean, these are all BASF, chemical companies, energy companies, Duke Energy, DTE Energy, Koch Industries. You know, they're all there. They are all there. Cargill, Rio Tinto. And yeah, these processing businesses are dirty businesses, but it doesn't give them a free pass in order to, you know, as far as the pounds released versus the toxicity and what that actually equates to. And, you know, when you take a look and you break it down to the factory level, right? You know, the percent of toxic hazard is coming from a single facility. Some of these businesses, it's 100%. The byproducts are toxic. And what we've got to work towards is taking a look at those byproducts, and instead of just a disposal, is there another piece in the treatment train that they can be reused in other applications, and thereby reducing, you know, the level of toxicity or somehow eliminating it. I mean, we talk a good game, but at the reality of it, when you take a look at that top 100, and if the government wants to push these guys, they will push back, and they will push back through their lobbyists, their elected officials, and I think we're at the age of a reckoning, and it's going to take time. It's going to be painful, but there are going to be certain industries that are called on the mat and said, "Hey, you've gotten your pass, and you've played your game, and you've been able to jump through the legal loopholes in order to move forward. Pay your fine, and just like you said, it's a cost of doing business." I think in certain industries that's going to end.
Wouldn't it be great if they looked at a cost of doing business as to do it ethically and responsible to the environment? Because I personally believe you could do mining, you can do oil and gas, you can do any industry sector that you want to take a look at. It can be done responsibly if you incorporate, like, as you said, all the technologies that can deal with the final product. It can deal with
right.
how you're actually manufacturing, how you're actually processing. I think everything has a solution, and it would be great to see all that money and energy spent into either finding new solutions, you know, having technology to the next level with artificial intelligence. It will help us find solutions. I think there is an answer for everything.
Well, that was one of the reasons I got involved in the water business, because I took a look at it, and, you know, sustainability and resilience, they're real. That is something that is inherent, and it should be, to the way that water is treated and used, but that's not, unfortunately, always the case. And technology will drive this and push it forward. I think you're going to see AI being one of them, but, you know, we're in the middle of something right now that I think, when you take a look at traditional treatment trains in certain types of contaminants, Verano and AppTech Industries are going to be able to have a massive impact as far as your historical way of treating the wastewater versus what that looks like packaged with the material. And that's one of the reasons that I came out of retirement, because I just saw this and I said, this is real. And there's other people involved in this. Walter Lynch, who was the former CEO of American Water, he's our vice chairman. And so to have people like that, Bill Frake, who headed corporate development for Jabil, they're one of the largest third-party manufacturers in the world. He ran their aerospace and defense business as well, and their water business. These are the types of people that, And we're taking a look, and we're not done yet. What's the next technology? How is it going to? What's the impact? How is it going to really be a change, not only from a financial standpoint, but the next level of treatment and removal? Because again, I hate that word treatment, whether it's for water or whether it's in the medical community. Treatment doesn't solve a problem. What it does, it treats, and it elongates the process, and maybe it reduces the impact to some extent. But at the end of the game, you're still dealing with that problem, maybe to a lesser degree, but it's still a problem. It's not eliminated. I want to get to the point where do we have the capacity, and how do we eliminate a lot of the issues that we just treat now? And I think we're going to get there in a pretty quick pace over the course of the next decade, especially with the implementation of AI.
And with your company, is there any plan of it going public, or what's the game plan for that?
No, right now it was public at one time. It was taken private in 2019, and we've got great investors. The plan now is to grow this over the course of the next 3 years. We've got a product and service piece, and so there's a lot of opportunities to grow organically. There's also opportunities, too, that there's complementary technology services that can be brought in. And look, the folks at CIP, I haven't spent a lot of time on that, but I want to spend a minute. I mean, these guys are world-class with regards to CBP3s, which is community-based public-private partnerships. They're the best at what they do. And under the Infrastructure Act, you've seen a number of situations that lead pipe is going to be something that's driven for the next 2 decades, the removal and replacement of lead pipe. So we've got numerous opportunities on that side, and we're just at the beginning stages. And the good thing about that under the Infrastructure Act is that has been funded, and that money is there. So the trick is to unlock it at the state level. Once it gets there, projects are in motion, and then that transfer from the state revolving funds into the hands of municipalities, which sorely need to do these programs. These are typically underserved communities that, this is the first start of a larger implementation of doing things right. And the lead pipe can lead to other things like lead paint removal. Once we get to the house, what are the other health issues that can be addressed under these types of programs?
I would love to see a public company that retail investors could participate in that was addressing PFAS. I haven't really seen anything out there. I know there's a company in Canada from UBC that was researching it, and now you're doing it. Is there anybody else out there that somebody could invest in that's doing something similar?
There's a number of people that have PFAS related technology based on removal. And I'm not here to give any investment advice, but I tell people, do your homework, read, and take a look at who's out there in the marketplace. And it's pretty easy. A lot of your bigger water companies say, we have PFAS solutions, but really, what's the underlying technology? The thing is, the trick here is going to be the flow rate and the actual percentage of removal. And then the third piece of this, Dawn, is the destruction. And this is where incineration is not going to cut it. And so there's got to be ways, and plasmark technology, like basically a tornado in a bottle, where you're able to destroy this instead of incineration. That's going to be the real trick that I think you'll see that tip over the course of the next 12 months.
So for investors just looking at trends in specific subsectors, looking forward, especially with Bobby Kennedy, part of the trajectory of what we're going to see and influencing water and environment, what would you tell investors to look for if they wanted to invest in the stock market in water and environmental companies?
Well, I mean, the water business as a whole continues to do well. I mean, the utilities, because of the situation with interest rates, they've gotten hit. They're somewhat undervalued at this point, and I'd like them always as a long-term investment because they have a yield and it's a great customer base. What I think professional investors are struggling with is the fact that a lot of those utilities scaled in the 90s and the early 2000s and into the mid 2000s. And where's that next basket of opportunities as far as acquisitions? And it's not at the same pace and the same rate that it was before. And so now you're relying in that area on the PUC for the rate increases. But believe me, we have enough capital spending and capital improvements to do as far as water infrastructure that can be, gotten back through the rate base there. So the utilities as a whole have always been a staple. And if you take a look at them historically over the last 20 years, they've been some of the best performing stocks in the stock market. So that's one area that I tell people you should always have exposure to. As far as, where I see the opportunities, I think the engineering firms are going to be at an interesting place, not only in the public equities, but also private equity as we go in. I think you've got a number of larger firms like the Hazens, Corollas, the Brown and Caldwells that are water-centric, but you've got a number of regional players that there's still consolidation to be had, and with great customer lists and specific either technology or services. And so I think we're in a good cycle in the water space right now. You're going to start, there's a number of private equity firms that have invested in water distribution companies, water distributors, technology, and you'll start to see those come out probably towards the end of 2025, beginning of 2026. And from a spending cycle, we're in a good spot in the water space. I would say at least clarity of spending for the next 24 to 36 months. It's a pretty much right down the fairway shot, and with really no disruptions. If there's a black swan event or a war or something like that, then water with everything else is in the same situation. But I think if you take a look at the fundamental characteristics of the business right now, the emphasis on companies and realizing that as we go through our CHIP Act and repatriation of manufacturing into the United States, especially in lieu of tariffs, one of the things that's going to be critical for those people building new plants is the availability of water. And so they will go to where the water is available. To build a chip manufacturer in Scottsdale, Arizona, or a place that is water starved already, it's boggling to me as far as the rationale. And people do it because of either favorable regulations or they've got, a plant system there already that they're working with. But I think areas that are water rich over the course of the next decade will win out as manufacturing increases, and especially as, we go through this whole CHIP Act and I haven't even talked about the data centers as far as their need for water. I think there will be a place where wastewater in certain areas, especially in the corridor around Washington, D.C. and Virginia, the data centers will continue to be built there. But what are sources of wastewater that can be pulled from? And you take a look at something as simple as the port systems and the airports in that vicinity, in that Virginia, Maryland vicinity. If the wastewater from those facilities could be treated and redirected to the data centers, again, moving towards a closed loop system where you don't have wastewater per se, you just have water treated to a disposition that can be reused by another industry. I think that's the direction where we're headed, and people should be taking a look at companies that are at the forefront of that.
That's great advice. In closing, I just wanted to ask you a personal question. On a scale of 1 to 10, how excited are you with 2025 and this new administration moving forward?
I'm at a 12, to be honest with you.
I love that.
I really am. I mean, as I said, the EPA, unfortunately, has always been somewhat of a political animal, and some have been more successful than others. Getting the right people into those positions. Lee Zeldin, through Waterkeepers, we did a lot of stuff with him up in the Sound, up along Island, and I think the world of Lee as a person. I think he is a person also of high integrity and gets things done, and that's where he's not going to be there just for the accolades of being the EPA administrator, then cash in afterwards and go into, private equity or a board of a company, leaves there to get something done. So I'm especially excited about that.
Well, I look forward to talking to you in the new year. Hopefully we can do a follow-up, see where your company's at, and see where water is in terms of an investment opportunity and just the market in general. That would be fantastic.
Happy to, Dawn. It's great to catch up with you. Sorry it's been that long since 2007. A lot's transpired since then. But, I'll make sure that, please, I'm available, and it's always great to spend time with you.
Thank you for listening to today's podcast. InvestorIdeas.com is a go-to platform for big investing ideas. From breaking stock news to top-rated investing podcasts, we cover it all. Our original branded content includes podcasts such as Exploring Mining, Cleantech, Crypto Corner, Cannabis News, and the AI Eye. To learn more about our site, go to InvestorIdeas.com. Our site does not make recommendations for purchases or sale of stocks, services, or products. Nothing on our site should be construed as an offer or solicitation to buy or sell products or securities. All investing involves risk and possible losses. Paid content is always disclosed. Global investors must adhere to regulations of each country. Please read the InvestorIdeas.com privacy policy on our website. Thanks and have a great day.